be here? Or?
I was not informed that she wouldn't be, but it looks like
Mark Denny.
Here.
Ellen Stork.
Here.
Jane Bailey.
Here.
Will Smith.
Here.
Rocky Hempel.
Here.
Robert Owens is not going to be present. Tom Dials.
Here.
Jeff Spink.
Here.
And I'm present, Steve Rosenthal, so we have 8 members present. Do I have a motion on last month's minutes? So that must have been February's.
Second.
Who made the motion? I didn't hear a motion.
I heard somebody say so moved.
You make a motion? I didn't hear that. You hear better than I do.
Well, I thought he said so moved.
You heard it before I even said it.
That's pretty good.
Great imagination.
Yeah. Yes, Pete. We have a motion on the floor with approval of February minutes. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Mark Denny.
Yes.
Ellen Stork.
Yes.
Jaden Bailey.
Yes.
Will Smith.
Yes.
Rocky Hempel.
Yes.
Tom Dials.
Yes.
Jeff Spink.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Secretary's report.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We have 2 plats that are on the regular agenda, 1 plat on the consent agenda. Those 2 items that are on the regular agenda, they just are asking for very minor exceptions, but because they are exceptions, we need to go ahead and present them to you. Just very, very quickly, no reason to belabor any points. We have a special use permit language amendment, and also we're going to take a look at the comprehensive plan review and hopefully get that adopted or get a decision on that and move that forward. Other than that, I have nothing.
I didn't see any language for the special use permit.
So the first link, that did not get put in there, but it did get updated, and I believe Stephanie sent an email out to everyone. I know some of you did get updated, but so it's in there. We'll pull it up here, and up on the projector we have exactly what's being proposed to be changed, and Amy will go through it very clearly.
You're not the Lone Ranger, Mr. Chairman. I'm in the same boat.
You didn't get it either, huh?
Well, I failed to download the new link.
Okay. Well, I'm at least not the only one. That's all?
That's it.
Okay. Any decorations, anyone? I have a motion for the agenda, 1 on the consent, and 4 cases or 5 cases?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, and Tom made the second. Motion on the floor with a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Mark Denny.
Yes.
Ellen Stork.
Yes.
Jaden Bailey.
Yes.
Will Smith.
Yes.
Rocky Hempel.
Yes.
Tom Dials.
Yes.
Jeff Spink.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. And on to the first case we're here, and I think that's Teton, isn't it? Leavenworth County Planning Commission will now hear case number DEV 22-005-006, preliminary and final plat for Teton Acres as outlined in the posted agenda. This is not a public hearing item. Staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a 2-lot cross-access easement plat named Teton Acres. The property is 18.36 acres in size, generally speaking. And as Crystal mentioned, this plat is on regular agenda just because there are some exceptions being granted. We cannot we cannot put this on consent when there are exceptions being asked for. You guys have to approve those exceptions. They were outlined in the staff reports. If you have any questions, I am ready to answer your questions, and Tim is here to also respond to any questions that you might have. The staff is generally supportive of this division of the land, as long as the exceptions are granted by the Planning Commission.
Okay. Any questions of staff? I'm going to personally say I don't like it, because I don't like lots like that. Angled, and I think the property was ruined when they sold off the first, and it should stay the way it is. But that's my personal issue, so we'll go on. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good evening, Commissioner, staff. Joe Herring, Herring Surveying, 315 North 5th Street. As Crystal said, minor exceptions asked here. We had a discussion in staff meeting about cross-access easement plats. What is the right-of-way? What is the lot line when it leaves the right-of-way? And cul-de-sacs and width to depth. And I think, that was all cleared up. And just here to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions of the applicant?
I don't think your mic's working.
Mike,
Nope, sure isn't.
I better turn this on for later, huh?
No, it was on. It was on.
They didn't want you to hear it.
They don't want to hear me.
I didn't hear you.
What'd you say?
Any questions?
Is there any additional information to be presented?
No, sir.
Any questions or comments, commissioners?
I just had one question, I guess, for staff on the two exceptions. Normally, I thought, don't we give a reason why we're given that kind of, I want to call it a variance, but why we're allowing that? Or I didn't see that. If it's in there, I missed it.
We typically we call it out, which is what we've done here. We have changed the format of the.
Right.
Now, as far as why exactly it's being asked for, yes, Commissioner Denny. Typically, we would state that the lot line is perpendicular or parallel, or the width to depth ratio is not exact. So that's something we can definitely make sure we get in there next.
Yeah,
But it's
and
usually
really
because of a land issue like
right.
that, not just because they'd want it that way.
Well, and that was my point, and why
I
I
know.
think maybe we should do that, in my opinion, is because then the next person that comes in and then they say, well, you gave this one okay, without giving any type of reason as to why. I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a cross-access easement. They are attempting to use the existing driveway to have their roadway. Of course, the cross-access easement requirements say that if two houses are using a driveway, that it can be used as essentially a private driveway. However, you have to get the appropriate amount of road frontage and such, so that's why they have that cul-de-sac there at the end of it.
Yeah, there's one in there somewhere.
It does
I looked at
certainly
it.
create awkward lots. There's no doubt about that. However, the policy that's been passed by the Board of County Commissioners is to allow properties like this to be able to be divided via a cross-access easement, where they previously would really not have been able to be divided further because they don't have the appropriate amount of road frontage and such. So
I disagree because I think some properties just can't be split. I mean, it was split already once with that one part off the front, and that's what caused the problem. So it was self-induced as far as I'm concerned, but if there's no other discussion, I'll still entertain a motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Motion Man.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the proposed preliminary plat and final plat as outlined in case DEV 22-005, 22-006 be approved, that the findings on the golden factors set forth in the staff report and adopted by the Planning Commission and substantiated by the fact, testimony, evidence presented be adopted by this board, that the conditions set forth in the staff report be made part of this preliminary and final plat.
I'll second that.
We have a motion on the floor and a second to approve case number DEV 22-005-006, preliminary and final plat for Teton Acres. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Members present. Mark Denny.
Yes.
Said yes.
Yes.
Okay. Alan Stork.
Yes.
Jaden Bailey.
Yes.
Will Smith.
Yes.
Rocky Hempel.
Yes.
Tom Dials.
Yes.
Jeff Spink.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. The Board of County Commissioners will consider this item no earlier than March 23rd, 2022 meeting. The commission agenda is posted in the Leavenworth County website and is available for public viewing. Any One wishing to attend the Board of County Commissioners meeting to give public input will need to contact the Board of County Commissioners office prior to the meeting date as space is limited. Okay. Leavenworth County Planning Commission will now hear case number DEV 22-009-010, preliminary and final plat for Downing Acres as outlined in the posted agenda. This is not a public hearing item. Staff report.
All right. As mentioned, this is a preliminary and final plat submitted to you at 24283 State Avenue. It is also requesting an exception to the lot depth to lot width ratio. The current property is over 18 acres in size. They are wanting to create two lots. One would be a 6-acre lot approximately, and the other would be over 12.5 acres or approximately there. Again, they are requesting lot depth to lot width ratio exception. They do not have enough frontage to create that depth to be able to create the two parcels, so that is where that request is coming from. Otherwise, staff is in support of this request.
Okay. Any questions of staff?
For those that don't know the location of this, I believe this is the one off 16 Highway as you go out of Tonganoxie up where the fire station is. And then you take the first road to the west. And that's how you get to it. Visited.
Any questions of staff?
Well, I'll just say again for the record, I mean, it just is, Steve, I know you remember
I'm the
this.
same way.
I mean, we
All
went-
three plats that we have there, I wouldn't.
We spent a lot of
not allow it all.
and I'm probably sounding like the old man get off my lawn type of thing, but we spent a lot of time going through this of getting rid of these spaghetti lots, piano key lots, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And
Then
now
they're making a flag lot.
flag lot, yeah.
Out of it.
And
so.
Maybe that's just the ebb and flow of how things go.
Yeah.
But I know that we were really trying to get away from these, and now we're granting them. So I guess my question is why do we even have the lot to the width to depth ratio if we're not going to hold people to it?
Right.
This, again, is a minor deviation, which is why staff is supportive of it.
Yeah, this one isn't as bad as the other one.
Right.
But it's still bad, and you're making a flag lot. And why you make the flag lot? Why
But
don't you just go all the way back? Make 2 9-acre tracts if you're going to do it.
And I'm not saying I'm against this necessarily, but and again, to your point, is the speed limit is 55, so is it okay? 56 is okay. It still is in excess of the speed limit. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So with those lot to depth ratios, the stated goal would be just a standardized what would be the goal we're trying to accomplish?
Sure. So previously, as Commissioner Denny stated, we used to get, as we call them, spaghetti lots, piano key lots. Those were very, very common throughout the county. You'd have 200 feet of road frontage. Go back, I don't even know how far. Joe can probably tell you to get a 10-acre lot.
Right.
You are wasting a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And so several years ago, a width to depth ratio was implemented. Regularly, exceptions are granted on it. Staff's perspective is if it's within a couple of percentage, points, then is it worth fighting and keeping a property owner from being able to divide their property? Probably not. We do have one that will be coming up potentially in the next couple of months where it is a pretty egregious difference between the lot width to lot depth, and staff has different feelings on that. But it is, as you all know, the Board of County Commissioners has been very pro land development. There have been some discussions about whether or not that lot width to depth ratio should just go away completely. Staff's perspective is that it should not go away completely. Perhaps it needs to be modified. That's something that we've been talking about internally, and it may be coming before you in the next several months. But that is the purpose of it, Commissioner Bailey, is to try to keep lots from being either super wide, eating up a bunch of road frontage, or being really, really narrow and just wasting ground back behind the build site.
But when we did get exceptions, it was because something with the land. It was either
Right, there was a reason why.
or something you couldn't get to it, and so the exception was granted, but not just because the owner wanted it that way. So anyway,
Yeah, and again, not to belabor the point, but you said we have another one coming that's more egregious.
Potentially
More egregious, or it's potentially coming that's more egregious. But what's egregious?
yeah,
That's the thing.
yeah. I think these are myself, but
So that's the part to me where we get to a slippery slope type of thing.
yeah, right.
That's true. I remember what Mr. Van Paris said in terms of precedent and looking at each one as an individual
Right.
case.
Yeah.
And kind of using discretion to determine what we're trying to accomplish. This one, I don't.
No, and I'm not saying, and I'm.
But I see your
again,
point about.
I'm talking more big picture here. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
this
Right.
specific one.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll continue. Does the applicant wish to speak? The applicant's here on this one, is he? Is there any additional information to be presented? Questions or comments, commissioners, or I'll entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I propose that the preliminary plat, final plat, as outlined in case DEV 22-009, 22-010, be approved, that the findings on the golden factors as set forth in staff report, as adopted by the Planning Commission and substantiated by facts, testimony, and evidence presented, be adopted by this board, and that the conditions set forth staff report be made part of this preliminary and final plat.
Second.
Tom, Jaden. Motion on the floor with a second to approve case number DEV 22-009 and 010, preliminary and final plat of Downing Acres with staff recommendations. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mark Denny,
Yes.
Alan Stewart,
Yes.
Jaden Bailey,
Yes.
Will Smith,
Yes.
Rocky Hempel,
Yes.
Tom Dials,
Yes.
Jeff Spink.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. The Board of County Commissioners will consider this item no earlier than March 23rd, 2022 meeting. The commission agenda is posted in the Leavenworth County website and is available for public viewing. Anyone wishing to attend the Board of County Commissioners meeting or give public comment will need to contact the Board of County Commissioners office prior to the meeting date, as space is limited. Okay. We're now on to consider case DEV 22-004, consideration of amendment of Article 22, special use permits and temporary use permits as outlined in the posted agenda. Does require a public hearing. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Staff report.
Okay, Commissioners, before you is a request to amend Article 22 of the zoning and subdivision regulations. This article specifically pertains to special use permits and temporary special use permits. This request comes out of conversations that have been had between the Board of County Commissioners and staff pertaining to how special use permits, the process is set up over the past couple months. Currently, all special use permits are approved with time limitations put into place. You guys see those regularly, the 5, 10, 20 years, depending on how many times they've applied. The Board of County Commissioners expressed some interest in maybe doing away with those time limits. And if a special use permit were approved underneath this new policy, it would be approved essentially with no limitation in time. Now, they would still be responsible to ensure that they meet the conditions of their special use permit. If they are found to be in violation of that permit at that time and they don't do anything to fix those said violations, it could be brought back before this body or the Board of County Commissioners to revoke that special use permit. And then also, once that use stops on a property for longer than 12 months, like current policy allows for, that special use permit would go away naturally. So they are proposing, like I said, to remove those time limits from special use permits. In addition to that, staff did also include some amended language. Can you change the slide? This first rule would be removing or replacing, all current special use permits that have been approved through this body and the Board of County Commissioners, to give them that essentially no time limits on their approval. Obviously, they would still have to be in compliance with the conditions of their permits when it was granted, and they will also have to make sure that they are established on that property and that 12 months haven't removed the vesting they have on that parcel. The second piece of the amendment is removing those time limits within the language. Oh, sorry. Go back. We are removing the 20 copies required. No, Josh. The 20 copies required. This is just cleaning up. Now that we have electronic submittals, there's no reason that they need to submit 20 copies of a site plan to our office. So we're just cleaning up that to better reflect current practices. And then we added some language that says if a person have been found to be in violation of operating a business or use without a special use permit, the application fee shall be doubled at the time of submittal. This reflects other policies in regards to building permits. Say somebody starts building a house without getting the appropriate permits. That is built into our permit fee schedule, so we would make the same requirement here for special use permits. The fourth amendment to these regulations would be under conditions of approval, which would be removing those time limitations within that language, so they would be granted without expiration. The fifth amendment to this section is changing the annual review section. We would modify it to be titled Publication and Review. Currently, that section requires that this office prepare a annual report that would be submitted to you, saying essentially reviewing all special use permits that the county currently has on record and providing recommendations. It's very vague. I don't know if we've ever had a clear practice on how that is to be operated.
I never heard one.
Yep. So we are recommending to modify that to say that the administrative official, so Crystal, shall create a list of all active special use permits, at which time it would be published annually. And then, upon receipt of a substantiated complaint or evidence that a special use permit has been modified or expanded, the planning department may request submittal of documentation or an inspection to be held to verify that the conditions of a special use permit have not been violated. If a special use permit has been found to not be in compliance with the conditions of their approval, the planning department shall proceed with code enforcement until the time that all violations have been remedied. Or they can resubmit their special use permit to have it modified to the current constraints of their business as they are working with it without the specified approval. So they're given those two options. But we wanted to clarify that if somebody is violating their special use permit, they would either have to fix the issue or it would need to come back before this body and the Board of County Commissioners to be able to operate in that new manner. And then the final amendment that we are proposing for you guys today is actually to the temporary special use permits. We are adding a type number 7, a type number 6, which would basically state that any use that would require a normal special use permit in our table of uses could be required as a temporary special use permit, meaning that this body would recommend a time limit be placed on them. For example, the what's the tower? Not a cell phone. Not the cell phone tower. The tri-hole. Thank you. The intention of the cranes. Thank you. I'm still learning, guys. The tri-hole crane operation, the intention of that is to be on a very specific time frame and of limited permission. So that would now fall under this temporary special use permit category. So it would still give the Board of County Commissioners the options to place time limits on special use permits. With that, that is all of the recommended language amendments.
So it really just did away with coming back. Didn't do anything about saying what we can do with a special use permit or any guidance on do we want special use permits or we don't want special use permits? What kind of requirements we should make on special use permits? Nothing was brought on that?
No, this is purely about removing those time limitations on special use permits. I think that is more of a policy decision.
You're still going to recommend denial of all special use permits because it doesn't fit the comp plan?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, if you'd indulge a few editorial comments from me. I have worked with the Planning Commission or Planning and Zoning staff on this. I'd like to preface my comments with two observations. 90% or more of the special use permit renewals that come before you are passed without any controversy.
Right, I agree.
But the preparation of those renewals takes a substantial amount of staff time and imposes cost and effort upon the holders of those special use permits. The concept is rather than commit county resources, your time and the Board of County Commissioners' time on those procedures is to more or less allow an indeterminate period of time so that that staff time, your time, and or the Board of County Commissioners' time could be committed towards new applications for special use permits and or enforcement of the terms of existing special use permits. I'll offer you an example. This morning, the Board of County Commissioners set a review hearing for an existing special use permit upon what they believe could be violations. So by setting renewal dates on every special use permit, it's viewed that an inordinate amount of your staff time is spent on these matters that are utterly uncontroversial and simply burden both the property owner, you, and the Board of County Commissioners, and that staff time and those resources and your time could be better spent on reviewing new applications and or enforcement actions on existing special use permits. I would offer this: the changes do not affect the following. Special use permit applications would still come before this board. I'll call it the gateway. They still have to go through that gate for review as to whether or not they should be granted. By not setting determined, quite frankly, almost arbitrary review dates, the property rights of the owner of that special use permit can be a little more protected. A 5-year review period, even a 10-year review period, if that special use permit involves the capital expenses, the construction of a building, the investment in machinery, investment of time, livelihood, for them to have to come back every 5 years, even 10 years, creates an air of uncertainty, and particularly given the fact that, again, 90% or more of the renewals, they come forward, no one objects, and you thank them and they leave. Then they have to come back before the Board of County Commissioners, they thank them, they leave, and that time could be better spent.
I don't disagree with that at all. If they're approved and they're obeying all the regulations, and the neighbors are the ones who are probably going to turn them in if they're not.
But I would ask one, I'm not sure if it's in the regulations, and I apologize. I would ask that on all special use permits granted, or temporary special use permits granted, that a provision be provided that no special use permit or temporary special use permit shall be allowed to create a public nuisance.
Right.
And that, as time goes by, what's permitted today could 20 years in the future be a nuisance to the neighborhood as it's changed around it. And that would allow a review period at that time.
But it still gives us no guidelines to go by on approving a special use permit, and they're still going to recommend denial because it doesn't fit the comp plan. That didn't change any of that. And that's really what I think needed to be changed.
We've not been given direction to change that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, if I have some liberty to speak on behalf of the board, yes, denial is presented on every special use permit application, and that denial does not stop the hearing or consideration of that special use permit application. And I think you'll see that fade away, particularly after you address the next item on your agenda.
If I could ask a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Councilor Van Paris, the vignette you just cited strikes me as something we need to think about. Are there jurisdictional property rights legal issues inherent in granting special use permits in perpetuity? And to continue your vignette, let's say I had the motorcycle shop that we approved last meeting exists behind Wallula Church out in Sherwood Forest, approved by this board, approved by the county commissioners, and that area gets annexed by the city of Lansing. What's the legal status of that?
Unless the annexation laws of the state of Kansas are changed, that use would be grandfathered in with respect to the city's zoning ordinances. So that use would continue until such time as perhaps it became a public nuisance under the guise and consideration of the city. But granting of a special use permit is a rezoning because you're allowing a use that is not allowed. Okay. So, but at the same time, it confers a property right on the holder, and setting a renewal date of every 5 or 10 years kind of calls the validity of that right into question.
I don't disagree with the intent. I'm just concerned about, I'm not going to be around 20 years from now. In perpetuity is a long damn time. And, what we may do is remove the workload from the staff here and put you in court or Lansing's attorney in court because you're not going to be able, if it's a property right, and if that's how it's going to be treated by the owner, you can't deny him of that without due process. And you're not going to be able to just go in and chop it off and say, hey, it's over.
Commissioner Dials, that's a very valid point. And I think I will call that a policy judgment on the part of this body and the Board of County Commissioners as to whether you wish to do it. I don't like the word perpetuity. In fact,
No limit.
We learned about
Okay.
the law against perpetuities with respect to wills and trusts. I would term it more without expiration. But terms can be built into it to acknowledge that as circumstances change, the validity of that grant of a special use permit, rather than a rezoning, can be considered.
Well, in the final version of this, I think that needs to be made clear because, I'm happy, you're glad, et cetera, but without expiration reads to me in perpetuity.
Point well taken, Commissioner.
What happens if the area changes? Let's say it's in the middle of big farms, and all of a sudden you get developed into 2.5 acre tracts, and there's lots of houses around it, and it's affecting them. What then?
I think, Commissioner, that's the provision that the special use permit would not be allowed to create a public nuisance. And that is a detrimental impact upon adjoining properties.
Is there a definition for public nuisance?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. Who's going to call it
Because
a
what
public
may be a
nuisance
nuisance to me may not be a nuisance to Alan.
Yeah.
It's a broad concept, Commissioner. Generally, to use the old Supreme Court justice who talked about pornography, you know it when you see it.
Well, I'm all for limited government and reducing the workload, but I think what Tom and Stephen talked about is making sure we're protecting the adjacent property owners as well. And how do we know 20 years from now what that's going to look like? I mean, that's the part.
I guarantee it's not going to look the same.
Well, we don't.
And Commissioners, I don't believe the proposed amendment prohibits you from setting a time limit if you believe that should be an appropriate condition. Or the amendment could certainly be changed to allow that.
And this will not be applied retroactively to previous ones that have time limits, or will it, like ones we
I think so, yeah.
Commissioner Bailey, yes, the intent
Yes,
is
they
would
do.
be allowed.
So we approved special use permit for Chuck Brewer a few months ago. We told him, this is your last one. Now, it won't be his last one.
No, so I think that along with like the tri-hole one, that it was very clearly stated that this will be the final special use permit. Those are ones that would need to come back through. Ones where we just give the typical, you've been approved for 10 years, come back and see us in 10 years. Those are the ones that would essentially just be allowed to continue to operate, assuming that they were within their special use.
But if those two that you just referenced had come in, say we pass this, and they came in 6 months from now, we wouldn't have put that regulation on them, right? Or
No, so
stipulation.
that's what we're saying. We're making sure there is a provision in case either the Planning Commission or the Board of County Commissioners believes that this particular use, while we are fine with it being here for X number of years, we are going to put a time limit on it. It is a truly temporary special use permit that is.
That is that final proposed amendment,
Okay.
that type
require
6.
more diligence in looking at it with keen eye.
Right.
And again, Commissioners, I think the intent is to remove that 90% of pro forma application, pro forma hearing, pro forma approval. Take that off the table so that your staff can spend more time on evaluating applications that should be truly temporary special use permits and or a special use permit that has grown into the public nuisance.
So this board relies on staff to tell us when they think a temporary special use permit is in order. And if we hear one that's not presented as a temporary special use permit, then we can make it one.
Absolutely. Your staff, including me, only makes recommendations to you.
Okay.
I would like to see it go farther, though, is kind of get some kind of clarifications where and what special uses can go and what zoning and stuff like that. I don't really necessarily have a problem with this. I mean, the questions we raised are questions, but I don't see that. But I don't think we're going far enough on special use permits. I think we need to say, you know, in this zoning, you can't have a big machine shop and lots of employees coming in and out, but in this zoning, you could have it. I don't think like a 2.5 or more dense zoning, there should be some requirement what they could put in there and what they couldn't put in there.
Well, then we don't approve it.
What?
Then we don't approve it if we don't like it.
Well, but if you don't have any guidelines on it, then
Our table of uses essentially does that. Granted, there are a lot of uses that are allowed with a special use permit in rural zoning districts, but it is staff's responsibility and the Planning Commission to evaluate each of those individually, as Commissioner Bailey was stating earlier. Because yes, while in all rural zoning districts, maybe an automobile mechanic shop is allowed with a special use permit, you do get to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis.
well, I'm trying to get away as from you not recommending denial of every special use that comes
To
in.
get at that issue, Crystal, what Steve's talking about, what if we were to add another bullet in Section 5 that said, that referenced the table of uses and said that any application must conform to uses specified, and then you've got the conditions, at least the beginning of the conditions I was talking to you about, Dave. It's just, you know, what are we looking at here that tells staff and gives us some assurance that we're getting a good
Commissioners,
recommendation?
you do have a fairly comprehensive table of uses. It changes all the time. And I'm going to give you an extreme example. I want to come to you next month for a special use permit to operate a Bitcoin mining facility at my property. That's not mentioned in your table of uses anywhere. I don't know where it would fit in, but it's a very real thing. I think Commissioner Schmidt gave a very good point. At that stage of your evaluation, that's where your judgment comes into play. And I don't think we could ever create a table of uses that would cover every conceivable use of property. The idea is to not infringe upon your judgment, your role as planning commission, but to try to facilitate a better use of staff time and your time with respect to special use permits.
I think also the distinction of the special use is that it inherently doesn't perfectly fit those spelled out.
If I could offer one thought, Commissioner Bailey, I do agree the blanket denial because it doesn't fit the comprehensive plan is somewhat counterintuitive because if it fit the comprehensive plan, then it'd be up for a rezoning, not a special use permit.
I think that's more verbiage than anything. Rather than staff recommends denial, maybe something along the lines of comprehensive plan would lead to denial. However, if these factors are met, then staff supports approval.
Or perhaps the comprehensive plan would dictate the use is only allowed through a special use permit.
Yeah.
Even better.
Right,
Even better.
yeah, that sounds better than just saying they recommend denial.
And Commissioners, I can assure you, it has not acted as a block to any of the matters that have come before you.
Anyway, any other comments?
I have two. It'll still be, if the property's sold, they'll need to come in for a new permit.
Well, sorry, I answered that question before you got all the way out. There
Okay.
is a provision that allows the new property owner to come in and assume that special use permit. They sign an affidavit stating they understand what all of the conditions are and they agree to abide by those conditions. If they want to vary those conditions, they want to expand the operations.
Then they have to come.
To come in. But if they're going to assume it as it is, they do not need to come back before.
Okay. The next thing is, once we put this in place, if that's what we decide to do in the commissioners, how about notifying the current holders of the special use permit and tell them that the conditions have changed? You know, as far as your permit, it's not a 5-year or 10-year one.
Yes, that.
Because you'll have to complete the list, so you might as well notify them,
Yes.
the ones that you need to notify.
And I think that is covered in the section where it states that those existing currently shall continue.
But I mean, we
will
should
do.
send them a letter and notify me that this has changed and it's to your advantage, you know, that type of thing. So, okay, I don't have any other problems.
Anything else, anybody? Upon opening the public comment portion of this hearing, those of you who wish to speak either for or against this item upon recognition will give your name and address each time you begin to speak. This is necessary since the public hearing is being recorded. The public comment portion of this hearing is now open. We will hear from individuals present wishing to speak in favor or opposition of this request. Is there anybody calling in or anything? No? Is there any additional information to be presented?
No, sir.
The public comment portion of this hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments, commissioners, or I'll entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the proposed amendment changes to the 2006 Leavenworth County zoning and subdivision regulations as outlined in case DEV 22-004 be approved as substantiated by the facts, testimony, and evidence presented, be adopted by this board, and that the conditions set forth in staff report be made part of this amendment changes to the 2006 Leavenworth County zoning and subdivision regulations.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. What's the second? To approve case number DEV 22-004, consideration of the amendments to Article 22, special use permits and temporary use permits. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mark Denny?
Yes.
Alan Stork?
Yes.
Jaden Bailey?
Yes.
Wolf Smith?
Yes.
Rocky Hempel?
Yes.
Tom Dials?
Yes.
Jeff Spink?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. The Board of County Commissioners considers item at 9 a.m. on March 30th, 2022 in the Leavenworth County Courthouse. Anyone wishing to attend Board of County Commissioner meeting or give public comment will need to contact the Board of County Commissioners office prior to meeting date as space is limited. Case number DEV 22-001, consideration of the 22 Comprehensive Plan Annual Review, including amendments to the plan. It says here requires public hearing, but we've already had our public hearing, haven't we?
No, we have not.
Okay, so we did. Okay, it does require a public hearing. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Staff report.
Commissioners, this is case number DEV 22-001. This is the annual review of the comprehensive plan. Commissioner, to your point that you just made, as part of our annual review, we did have several work sessions. We had a couple of joint work sessions with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, and we also had a work session where we did invite the public to speak. However, that does not qualify as a public hearing. The public hearing takes place when the actual recommendations are being made. Through the comments that we've received from the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commission and input from the community, the few changes that we are seeing that we need to make here are discouraging the rezoning and splitting of lots which are already in platted subdivisions in existing neighborhoods. That's been very clear over the last several months. So staff will, assuming the Planning Commission agrees and the Board of County Commissioners agree with this, we will essentially add just an addendum to the comprehensive plan and put one little note in there under the future land use map stating that those types of rezonings, even if they fall in the RR 2.5 or another zoning district, that staff will not be supportive of those rezonings. We will amend the future land use map to the original proposed map. That is what has been requested by members of this Planning Commission. That map was provided for you. I provided the map that was originally presented to the Planning Commission that the Planning Commission forwarded on to the Board of County Commissioners. That map did have 2.5 acre zoning along all county hard surface roadways. So that's what you have. That's what is being presented. And then proceed with the proposed language amendments as outlined in the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Strategy Status. We have this chart here that staff has put together, and you can see that staff, the planning department and the public works department has been working on implementing many of the strategies that are found in the back of the comprehensive plan. One of the requirements for this comprehensive plan is that it would not sit on a shelf, and it has not sat on a shelf. It has not been perfect. It will never be perfect. However, I think it is working. We do need to make a couple of modifications. I do want to be clear. I think there's been a little bit of confusion from maybe some folks in the public and perhaps even some members of the Planning Commission. The comprehensive plan, we're not writing regulations, so there will not be big sweeping changes within the comprehensive plan. As you all know, it's a guiding document, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. We are working with what we currently have. We will continue to review it, and as things need to be modified, we will modify them. However, we're not going in and changing giant sections of it. That rezoning addendum that we're talking about, that is a pretty major modification. However, that's just, like I said, that's a minor text amendment to the comprehensive plan. I will answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for staff?
I'd just like to make a comment, if I could, to staff and everybody here. Overall, we had many hearings, and I know the chairman and myself and others were there. The current plan is the one that was chosen. It had a $280,000 price tag. I personally don't believe it's in the best interest of the citizens of Leavenworth County to change the map that we have. I think we can work through whatever we got. We've only given it a year and a half, and I just personally don't believe that it's in the best interest of Leavenworth County to change the map.
I would say the counter argument to that, from my understanding, would be that $280,000 led to that map, this map, not the one that the Board of County Commissioners approved. That was on those 5.
Right. And it was talked about at all the sessions that I went to that they wanted to keep the county rule. They did not want 2.5 acre zoning. almost every meeting I went to said that. That was, except for
But this is,
surveyor and developer, everybody else said they do not want 2.5 acre tracts in the county. Every time we get one, how many people come in and say the exact same thing? Wish they would have spoke up more, but at that time, but again, people don't complain until it fixed them. Any more comments in this time, or I'll open the public hearing. Upon opening the public comment portion of this hearing, those of you who wish to speak, either for or against this item upon recognition, will give your name and address each time you begin to speak. This is necessary since the public hearing is being recorded. The public comment portion of this hearing is now open. We will now hear from individuals present wishing to speak in favor of this request. Nobody by phone either. Anyone present wishing to speak in opposition to this request? In opposition.
Good evening again. Joe Herring, 16630 Gilman Road, as a citizen of this county. I've had some conversation with staff on the broad language of some of these things. The discouraging of rezoning of subdivisions, I understand that, but we've had some large lots that have been forced upon developers, maybe 40, 70, 90 acre lot size lots that still should be allowed to be considered to be rezoned. You also have subdivisions where you have the potential for every member to come in of that subdivision and ask for a rezone. You know, some are still owned by family and all family. So not having some specifications, you know, could hurt them in the future. One thing that I wasn't totally against this, I was actually going to speak in the beginning until the verbiage up there is splitting of lots already in subdivided areas. That has not been discussed. It was not part of the notification that was on the website. It was not in that chart that I could find, or maybe I missed it. But lot splits are allowed within our county. Sometimes some lots are 5, 10, 15 acres, and if they meet the zoning requirements and all the requirements of, you know, staff to width to depth and road frontage, they should be allowed to be split. I think that is
clarification there, Mr. Herring. Yes, so lot splits are allowed by state statute. So say you are in a RR5 zoning district and you have a 10-acre lot. As long as you can meet the zoning requirements, yes, we can. This is, and I see certainly what you're stating, that the language there makes it seem like lot splits are not being allowed. That's not the intention. It is rezoning 5-acre parcels in platted subdivisions to 2.5, and then splitting those lots into 2.5 acres is the intention of this. But certainly, I see what you're.
A combination kind of.
Yes,
okay.
I certainly understand. What
yeah,
you're saying.
That language wasn't on the notification on the. So that's where that concern came from. But again, you know, we do have some very large tracts of land that the previous planner made people plat into a 90-acre. I did several of them. Now I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. You clarified that, and I appreciate it.
Only got 3 minutes, so you better hurry. Get it back.
As for the map, I mean, the map that this board presented to the county did have a lot of 2.5 acres along all hard surface roads. So that was already there, and if this board does agree to send that back to them, the only thing I really talked to staff about was, if that happens, let's ask for a complete rezone of the county per that map. Let's stop all these rezones that have to come forward. If you're going to take it back with a rezone. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming there's no one else, since there's no one else here and no one said by phone.
The invisible man.
Very good. Okay. Is there any additional information to be presented?
Again, just some clarification. It's not that rezonings can't be considered. Anyone can apply for a rezoning anytime. So just because this potentially goes through does not mean that a landowner cannot apply. It does not mean the Planning Commission cannot recommend approval, and it does not mean that the Board of County Commissioners cannot approve said. Mr. Herring pointed to a few examples of very large lots. To my knowledge, at least one of those has been approved with their rezoning. So certainly, there is always room for the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners to make recommendations that are outside of what the black and white is of the comprehensive plan or the regulations. So it does not prohibit anyone from applying for a rezoning.
Well, this is a little better, but I still don't think it covers the county roads that really are subpar that need to be improved, and I don't see any way that putting more houses on it, more cars on those roads are going to help any. So that's still my comment on that. But the public comment portion of this hearing is now closed. I didn't do that. Are any questions or comments, commissioners?
I would just say, I mean, this is the map I remembered us submitting, and but at the risk of saying, having people tell me I'm wrong or disagreeing with me, I would say that the people that, for the most part, came and talked to us and were opposed to any 2.5 acre lots, they would still not be happy with this map.
No, I know.
And they would think if we passed this that we didn't even listen to them at all, because the majority of the county is going to be 2.5 or below. If you look at the county as a whole. So I'm just saying that for the record. But this is the original ones. Like you said, that was. Basically, all the people that invested the time and money and effort to go to those meetings wanted.
That's what we spent our money on, too.
Right.
To get this. We all agree with it or don't agree with it. This is what we came up with.
And to Mr. Herron's point, I understand where he's saying to just rezone it all, but that'd be a massive undertaking.
It is a very, very large undertaking.
Yeah.
You may recall when we rezoned County Road 1.
Yeah.
It was a very large undertaking.
Yeah. In theory, it makes sense, but I don't know. I don't know how that would pull that off.
Any other comments, or I'll entertain a motion?
Just to follow Mark's comment, the map we're talking about is the one that shows the yellow 2.5 on major county arteries. Okay, so this map that was in the draft that I got in 20 is not what we're referring to at all.
It's the one that was in our packet. So yeah, no, it's not that one.
Okay,
it's not that one.
no, I see the one that's here.
Yeah,
I just, a lot of the comments are going to be, you guys weren't listening.
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Which you're always going to have somebody that.
Oh, no, I mean,
Yeah,
What
You know,
on the
the-
counterpoint to that is this is far more reflective of that point of thinking versus what is
Right.
now.
Yeah.
The map that they have now.
and I understand the 2.5 acres instead of 5 acres. I mean, it is more houses. 5 acres is a total waste. 2.5 acres are pretty much a total waste, but less of a total waste because at least you got 2 houses on it instead of 1. But it doesn't count for the cost on public amenities like sheriff roads is the most part, which desperately need to be widened and shoulders put on a lot of these roads. Yeah, and it doesn't account for that, and doesn't really. There is no plan that I can see that is going to make these roads, approve these roads, and I don't think putting more traffic on these roads is going to be what the people of this county wants or needs, or for safety reasons, for that matter. But I do see their point, and they're looking at tax dollars, but tax dollars are not going to improve the roads. Public Works has said that from the time I've been on here, that the money that goes to Public Works from taxes do not build new roads, do not repair the roads that are there already. They've said that several times. And it's just enough to maintain the roads that are there already, and more traffic on them, it's going to take more maintenance.
Question for staff, because I maybe have had some disagreements with Crystal or some of the other staff. Let's say somebody comes in and wants to rezone, and they're like on the corner there by Dempsey Road, and it's that section there that's the green, so it'd be the 5 acres. I've always thought, it's contiguous to the 2.5 acre lot there in the rezoning, or the zoning for that 2.5 acres, and I've always been okay with that. But it seems to me we've maybe disagreed a little bit upon that, because I can't remember the one, but it was like literally right across the road. It was zoned 2.5 acres, and on this side of the road it was 5. And
so certainly one of the things that we have to remember, there has to be a dividing line somewhere, right? And it's easy to use roadways because they're very clearly defined. There's a particular commissioner who advocated very much for making sure that anytime we were proposing different zoning districts, that we use the center of the road, and either side of the roadway was the same zoning, which is what we do have in this. And hopefully that will help with some of them, but certainly what's being proposed is going to divide some properties, because I believe it was a half mile on either side of the roadway. I wish that I could say there's a definitive way to make sure that there's never any competition, contention, but there's not. Some communities do it, by the parcel. That has its advantages and certainly its disadvantages. You still end up with hard drawn lines where this is one zoning district and this is another zoning district, and it becomes a slippery slope. Because I certainly see your point. Well, this right over here is 2.5. What's the big deal if this parcel next to it is also 2.5?
right.
And then you do that, and then the next parcel, and then the next, and so slippery slope. I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you, but I do think that this map helps address that some.
Well, roads separate zoning districts all over this country.
I know, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good dividing line.
It's
Actually,
very
a
clear.
road is, and it does not have to be the same on both sides. I don't know where he comes up with that. He must not drive around very much.
Well, I think what the word was, and it was escaping me, was spot zoning.
Yes.
So, in that particular case, staff's position was that was spot zoning. And my argument was, I walk 50 feet, and the zoning is different. So how can that be spot zoning if the other zoning is right there that they're wanting to change to?
I will say that the term spot zoning is, it's maybe the best term that we have, but it goes along with public nuisance sometimes. It's hard to define exactly. As Commissioner Rosenthal just stated, you have dividing lines that are, roads. So, yeah, you could potentially have on this side of the road, you have B3 zoning where you have convenience stores, and on this side of the road, you have I2 zoning district where you have more industrial type uses. That's unfortunately just the way that it is. Then it becomes what does the board want to see? What type of development do they want to see? Do they want to see more I2 zoning and less B3, in which case then maybe, yes, you make a recommendation of approval. It's subjective, certainly. It's subjective.
Okay, any more discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve case DEV 22-001, comprehensive plan annual review as submitted by the staff, and include their report as part of our recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners.
A motion on the floor with a second to approve case number DV 22-001, the consideration of the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Annual Review with staff recommendations. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mark Denny.
Yes.
Ellen Stork.
Yes.
Jaden Bailey.
Yes.
Will Smith.
Yes.
Rocky Hempel.
No,
And
I gave the reasons earlier.
Tom Dials.
Yes.
Jeff Spink.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. The Board of County Commissioners consider as item no earlier than 9 a.m. on March 30th, 2022, in the Leavenworth County Courthouse. Anything else?
No, sir.
Guess I'll turn that in. We like to